بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم. So today inshallah we're going through مقبول and we're going through حسن لذاته حسن لغيره and حسن. So some of this we've already done in Baykuniya, some of it is we need to explain a bit. So this is what we've done so far. So we've done the top layers. We said it's mutawatir, it has طرق بلا عدد معين, and then you have ahad, which is mashhur, aziz or gharib. And after mutawatir you have the ahad, and ahad includes mashhur, aziz and gharib, and then gharib mutlaq, gharib nisbi. Now when it comes to mutawatir, what do we say here? That mutawatir, all of the mutawatir are maqbool, meaning sahih, meaning they are acceptable. We don't need to analyze the chain because the number of narrators itself supports the fact that it is sahih. Because we only look at sahih because are they liars? Are they make a mistake? When you such a large number of people, it is impossible for them to come together and fabricate a lie, then you don't need to look at the chain. And I gave examples before. So there's all of mutawatir is maqbool. But the ahad, whether it's mashhur, aziz or gharib, okay, all of these are neither of these you can just say, well, because it's mashhur is sahih, because it's aziz is sahih, because it's gharib is sahih. Amongst all of these you get maqbool and you get mardud. Are you following? So now these you have to analyze. This is what? Maqbool and mardud. Based on what? You have to analysis. You have to analyze. Here, once you say hadith is mutawatir, you know that the Prophet ﷺ said this, done this, or the information in there is sahih. When it comes to any of the ahad, whether it's mashhur, aziz or gharib, all of these have to be analyzed, and then we can come to a conclusion whether it's maqbool or mardud. Does that make sense? Yes. So he says here, وَخَبَرُ الْآحَادِ. So he says here, this is the mubtada here. This is the khabar. Okay? We've done this already. It's now this is a transition of the text. The khabar ahad, and then this is the hal of the ahad. The khabar ahad with a transmission, naql, transmission. Transmission, you can do transmission. So a khabar ahad, the transmission of an adil, within adil already in Baykuniya, meaning the narrator is reliable and credible. Ta'amuz zabt, they have a strong level of preservation. Again, we've done that. The sanad is muttasil, there's no breakage in the sanad, meaning every narrator has heard from the one above them. So anybody watching, we've already covered Baykuniya, so all these are already covered in Baykuniya, so I'm not going into detail again. There's no illah and there's no shadh. So any khabar ahad with a transmission of an adil who's ta'amuz zabt, with a linked chain, there's no illah and there's no shuzuz, then this huwa sahihu. So we didn't until here. We never said لذاته. We never done that in Baykuni. In his nazam, he doesn't mention this. لذاته means in itself. So basically what we done in Baykuni was just basically sahih. لذاته. Meaning in itself, intrinsically sahih. Now what does that mean? Look at it here. We have the ahad, okay? And the ahad either maqbool or it's going to be mardud. And the mardud we do later on. Now sahihun لذاته means that if it's a definition, there's tam, there's adil, there's tamuz zabt, there's muttasilus ittisalu sanad, and there is no illa or no shudud. Now when you have that, it's sahih lidatihi. Then you have a hasan lidati. What's hasan called? What's the hasan hadith? This is what? And here you have all the other conditions, but it's tamuz zabt. And in hasan, what do you have? You have khafiful dhabt. Correct? We've done that before. And what we done as Hasan was always lidatihi. We never mentioned the word lidatihi. Then you get sahihun lighayrihi. What does sahihun lighayrihi mean? If you have a Hasan lidatihi times 2 or more. So what happens now? We say a hadith becomes Hasan because the narrator has slight weakness in his dhabt. You following? But if 2 people narrate, 3 people narrate, what happens now? The element of the mistake and the error has been what? What's happened? It's been removed, hasn't it? So in itself is a Hasan hadith because its narrator is khafiful dhabt. Yes? But because the fear factor that we had, not the fear factor, but the fear that we had, the inhibition, not the right word, inhibition or the weariness that we had, that because the rawi is khafiful dhabt, we don't want to classify as sahih lidatihi when another narrator narrates at the same level. whether he's the same level or stronger narrator. We say now this hadith, this Hasan, is not Hasan, is Hasan لذاته, but لغيره, because of other hadith, or غيرها or غيرهما. Because of other things, now this hadith has now stepped up one level and become Sahih لذاته. Sorry, Sahih لغيره. So in essence, you have a Hasan, is the narrator is خفيف الضبط. And this gives him, the concern we have is, he may have made a mistake. He may have erred because he's made a few of those mistakes. So therefore his hadith is Hasan. But if another narrator narrates the same thing, so now we know, well, he would have made a mistake because both of them would have made the same mistake. They don't lie. And they both would have made the same mistake. So the condition of the word that we have of him making a mistake is gone. So it becomes, it's Hasan لذاته. But it's also have another level as well. As-Sahih غيره. The other hadith has now made it Sahih. The other hadith has now put it up a level. But it's not on the level of Sahih لذاته, it's on the level of what? Sahih غيره. Does that make sense? Are you following? And then we have the next level we have is what? Hasan لغيره. So Hasan لغيره is basically a da'if hadith, not any da'if hadith, certain da'if hadith, which have now been backed up with another Sahih or another Hasan hadith. So now this hadith from da'if becomes what now? Hasan لغيره. Does that make sense? So the ones that we done before was, so Sahih in itself is those conditions, and Hasan itself is what? This one of Khafif al-Zabt. If you have multiple Hasan لذاته, or if you have a Hasan لذاته, but the same hadith is also Sahih لذاته, then this hadith in itself is لذاته, but it's also called Sahih لغيره. You understand? If you got a da'if hadith, not every da'if hadith, because there's some da'if hadith or some mardud ahadith which cannot become Hasan لغيره. We do that later on. But if you have a Sahih لغيره, a Hasan as da'if hadith, and there are multiple narrations in certain circumstances, it becomes Hasan لغيره, it goes up one level. Not because itself is a Hasan hadith, but because the other narrations raises its level. It gives us taqwiyah, it gives it strength that, know what, yeah, it makes sense. Because other people have narrated it as well. So therefore, let's say for example, the son is munqati. So the son is munqati, so now we say, we don't know who the narrator, maybe he missed, we don't know it. But another hadith said the same thing, a third hadith says the same thing. So we say, now this Hasan لغيره. The chain is missing, so it's da'if, but because the other narrations back it up, now it becomes what? Hasan لغيره. Are you following? Does that make sense, everybody? So the question is, when you have a Sahih لذاته, so let's say for example, let's take a look at this one. Let's say for example, you got here, we have, so we say this is grade A, this is grade B, I don't want to call it, let's call it, say, grade A plus, grade A, okay, let's say we can have this grade A, grade B, okay? Now, we have a grade B hadith, okay? What we could have said here now, you have a Sahih, now this grade B, Hasan لذاته, okay? There's another narration. The other narration is either another Hasan لذاته or another Sahih لذاته. So now this Sahih لذاته stays Sahih لذاته. But what happens now is this Hasan لذاته moves up a level to B+. In itself is Hasan. So we can say this is A, this is B, this becomes B+ now. The Hasan لذاته stays a level, goes up a level. The Sahih لذاته stays itself. That will never change. That was لذاته. But the Hasan لذاته it goes up one level, it gets a plus. And in itself is Hasan لذاته. But so these two things are together basically. Every Sahih لغيره is originally what? Hasan لذاته. Does that make sense? Is that clear up? When we have a da'if hadith, what happens is that there's certain, the da'if hadith, all da'if are not the same. Let's say for example, a hadith is weak because of, there are certain uyub, certain defaults, which are munjabira. Injabara means to be able to patch up. They're patchable. If you got a flat tire, you got a small nail in it, you can patch it up. You got a massive rip, you say this is no use. You have to get a new tire. So certain hadith, let's say for example, there's a mursal hadith, or there is a mu'adal as well, a mu'adal from an authentic narrator, like Imam Malik's mu'adal, or there's a muttasil, there's a mu'allaq of Imam Bukhari, or there's a narrator who makes quite a few mistakes, something like this. Not a narrator who's a liar, or a narrator who's a fabricator. So those can never be patched up. Because yes. So if you've got a slight defect, a defect which makes it da'if, but the defect is patchable, is munjabira. This uyuba munjabira, this munjabir, this hadith da'if, is capable of being patched up. Then that can get promoted to Hasan لغيره. So not every da'if hadith can be promoted to Sahih Hasan لغيره. Some can. Are you following me? Yes? Okay. And then on the other hand, mardud, we'll do mardud later on, inshallah. Okay. Now, we see it, وَتَتَفَاوَتُ رُتَبُهُ, and rutab means sahih. بِتَفَاوُتِ هَذِي الْأَوْصَافِ. What's a hadith? A hadith sahih is what? It has ta'amul dhabt, adil. It has muttasil sanad, no shuzuz and no illa. So what he's saying is a sahih. But all sahih are not created equally. So all men are equal, but some are more equal than others. No? George Orwell. So we have here, these are sahih hadith, but all sahih are not equal. Some are more sahih than others. Okay. What he's saying here, let's say for example, you have ta'amul dhabt. But ta'amul dhabt is not like one level, like it's human beings, it's not like like a machine or a product. They say, okay, this is size 5, size 6, size 7. Human beings have everybody. No two people's eyes are the same. No two people's fingers are the same length. They have slight differences. But a glove will fit roughly. You have a size 8 glove. It's like a shoe. Everybody's foot size is slightly different in inches or centimeters. But you have a rough size. So even here you have, okay, once you ta'amul dhabt, that's fine, it's sahih. But the quality of dhabt varies from narrator to narrator. They're all different. So the stronger the narrator, the better it becomes. Are you following? So for example, let's say there's a hadith of a strong chain, but the top of the chain is Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. So Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, his understanding of the Prophet's meaning, his intention, compared to another narrator who came from the village and he came and he heard a hadith in al-Haq. So obviously there's no chain in there, but let's say for example a sahabi, let's say for example one tabi, let's say for example Nafi. I don't think Nafi met those guys, but let's say for example there's a person who married from, there's a chain, and it's exact same chain, but one has Imam Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, as the last narrator, one has a villager, an Arabi. So we say, well, obviously the hadith is, we say both the sahih, two sahabis, they won't lie. Then we have the same tabi'i, narrated from both of them, and then from there you have the same thing, but we say, well, they're not the same. Are you following? You have a hadith of a thiqah narrator, then you have a hadith with some of the great muhaddith like Shu'bah, or Qutaybah ibn Sa'id, or Imam Malik, or Nafi, like those people who are like Imam Shafi'i. So great people who have preservation and memory, and they also have what? They also have understanding of the meaning of the word, so they don't transmit without any misunderstanding. So obviously the sahih, tatafawut. What does tatafawut mean? Vary. They vary. And here rutab is the plural of rutbatun. So rutbatun, the plural of rutbatun is rutabun. Okay, not rutab with a ta, that's the dates. Rutab means levels. So the levels of sahih vary due to the varying of these qualities. The stronger the zabt, the stronger the sahih the hadith becomes. You understand? So every single hadith that's sahih is not at the exact same level. They have varying levels. Understood? Yes? Everybody following? Okay. And now he's saying it, وَمِن ثَمَّ. Here, thumma means there. Sorry, then. And min thamma means therefore. Therefore, قُدِّمَ صَحِيحُ الْبُخَارِيِّ. Therefore, the Sahih of Imam Bukhari is given preference, then Muslim, then shartuhuma, then the one that's under conditions. Basically, we're saying here then, all the Sahih hadiths are of different levels. And they say, based on this, you can say, well, they're not all the same. So therefore, the Sahih of Bukhari is the first, is given preference. Then the Sahih of Muslim, then what's on the condition of the two of them. Okay, so we're saying here, Imam Bukhari rahmatullahi alayhi, in his Sahih, he has put some condition, like again, I mentioned in another video as well somewhere, that Imam Bukhari rahmatullahi alayhi, he's never explicitly mentioned what his conditions are. Other ulama have, for example, Imam Abu Dawud rahmatullahi alayhi explained his Risalah to Ahli Makkah. Imam Abu Dawud rahmatullahi alayhi, he wrote his Sunan. Then people of Makkah asked him, like, can you explain your manhaj, your methodology in the hadith? So he wrote a letter explaining it. Imam Nasa'i is an oral tradition explaining how he made his Sunan al-Mujtaba and etc. Imam Bukhari, he hasn't explicitly mentioned anywhere, we don't have any documentation saying what his conditions are. Imam Muslim rahmatullah alayhi, we don't have any conditions, any documentation saying these are his conditions. We know that they didn't ihtimam and they were particularly only Sahih hadith. But they didn't have And they did have criteria, we don't know what the criteria are. So that's the first thing. But Imam Bukhari, some of the things that we know, one thing that we do know is that what he has done, he has put certain conditions in his book. So for example, one thing that the ulama have mentioned is that Imam Bukhari, rahmatullah alayhi, he, obviously the sanad has a muttasil. So you have narrator A. You have narrator A, and above them you have a narrator B. Okay? Narrator A and narrator B. Okay? So narrator A and narrator B. So with the link between the two of them can be a few of them. One is that they never even met. Like they never Adamul Mu'asara. Adamul Mu'asara. That's like one possibility. Mu'asara, there's no asr, meaning they don't share the same time. Asr ba mufa'ala, to share the same time. So let's say for example, Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhu and Imam Malik. So they don't even have mu'asara, they don't even have the same time, so they couldn't even have met. The other one is mu'asara, only mu'asara. Mu'asara. That in the same period, but they didn't hear. For example, Abu Huraira and Hassan al-Basri, I think. Hassan al-Basri, I think Hassan al-Basri, did he hear from Abu Huraira or not? So there was mu'asara, but they didn't hear each other. Or Imam Bukhari and Abdul Razak as-San'ani, rahimahumullah. They were the same era, but they never met. So it's mu'asara. Then you can have mu'asara and liqa. They have met, they've proven they have met. And you can have mu'asara, same era, there's liqa, they've met, and it's also proven that they've heard. So these are the four relationships that you can probably establish between two different narrators. Now obviously, if there's no mu'asara, and A says B said, what's it going to be? If there's no mu'asara between A and B, and A said that B said, what's that going to be? A munqati, isn't it? There's a missing link, because A and B never the same period. Now, what happens here now? Imam Muslim rahmatullah alayhi, he says that if A, because obviously they haven't, like, they were in the Iran, they came, Imam Bukhari passed away 256. So between him and the narrator before, there was like 100 years, 150 years between them. So they never met all of them. So what Imam Muslim said is that, look, if A and B were in the same era, the A and B were in the same era, and A said that, and A, then there's an an-ana. We did an ana already in Bayquniya. So if there's an an-ana between A and B, okay? So A said and B. So Imam Bukhari rahmatullah alayhi said, Imam Muslim said, if they're in the same era, there's mu'asara. We will assume that this is what? That they've met. That is an-ana is sama, it's not munqati. So let's say for example, there's narrator A and narrator B. Let's say for argument's sake, he passed away in 150, he passed away in 130. Okay, he passed in 130. Is it possible that did they exist in the same era, within the same era? Yes, they're in the same era, weren't they? He passed in 130, he passed in 150, so he's 20 years younger than him. So they were in the same era. Yes? Are you following? So now Imam Muslim will say, well, if he says an, they were in the same era, so is this hadith muttasil or munqati'? He doesn't say, we don't have any explicit narration that says that he heard from him. He says an. Yes? So what happens now? This is going to be what? What is this going to be? Imam Muslim says muttasil sanad. Be 100% sure. This is he takes this hadith in. Are you following me? So if there's mu'asara, there's in the same era, A and B are in the same era, and there's an ana, Imam Muslim takes this hadith in his Sahih. Imam Bukhari says, no, I do one step further. If A narrates from B and there's mu'asara, unless there's no proof that they have met, he doesn't take the hadith in his Sahih. He doesn't say it's not saying it's da'if, he doesn't take it. So he only takes, Imam Muslim will take this. As long as we are sure there's mu'asara and there's an ana, then we will see Imam Muslim will say, well, we will assume that unless there's other evidence, as tadlis, he will take this as what? He will take this to be muttasil sanad. And Imam Bukhari mentions he only takes this one. That what? If there's mu'asara and they have met, then the mu'an'ana will be considered muttasil. Are you following me? So basically what you could say, for example, in law terms, is that in Imam Muslim's philosophy is liqa is proven unless otherwise stated. So an ana is muttasil unless otherwise proven wrong. So the an'ana between two mu'asir is considered a muttasil unless otherwise proven guilty, proven not to be sama. And Imam Bukhari says no. The asal is not having liqa. You have to prove liqa. So Imam Muslim says that this is mu'asir and is an'ana, then this is going to be liqa unless otherwise proven. Imam Bukhari says no, the liqa is not proven. The asal is not to have liqa. Mu'asir is not enough. You have to prove the liqa. Continue explain. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala Rasulil Kareem. So carry on. We sing here. وَمِن ثَمَّ قُدِّمَ الصحيح البخاري. That as a whole, generally speaking, as a rule of thumb, it's not like every single hadith, but as a rule of thumb, the ahadith in Sahih Bukhari are deemed as, again, it's not by extension every single hadith. It's not that every single hadith in Bukhari is more sahih than every single hadith in Muslim. It's just as a whole, collectively, the Sahih Bukhari is deemed to be the most sahih. ثُمَّ مُسْلِمٍ أي ثُمَّ صَحِيحُ مُسْلِمٍ. Then the second level is Sahih Muslim. Okay? And then some people have gone on to say, for example, you can even put it in, like, even make this rule of thumb even a bit more. We can say, for example, you can go like this. As a rule of thumb, again, it's a rule of thumb, not every single hadith. We can have what? We can say, if it's in Bukhari and Muslim, that's the most sahih. And that's called what? Muttafaqun alayh. Muttafaqun alayhi. That means what? Both of them have narrated it. That's going to be the strongest as a rule of thumb. Then after that, what's my next level? Bukhari, then Muslim. Then shartuhuma. Then shartu Bukhari. Then shartu Muslim. So this is kind of like a rule of thumb you can go by. Okay, you do more detail if you go into this, if you specialize in usul hadith. So this is a rule of thumb. What Bukhari and Muslim have agreed upon, usually this is going to be the most sahih hadith. Then what Bukhari himself has mentioned, what Muslim himself has mentioned, there was in the condition of Bukhari and Muslim. But again, as I mentioned to you before, they've not really explicitly mentioned what the conditions are. So people have made, like, try to come to a conclusion that this is on the Sahih of Muslim, this is on a shart of Bukhari, but it's not always that case. Okay? So this is how we can have different levels of Sahih. And this is a rule of thumb to go by. Okay? Right? And this is Sahih al-Bukhari. This became known as the most asahul kitabi asahul kutubi ba'da kitabillah after Imam Malik's Muwatta. So first, before Imam Bukhari, people used to refer to the Muwatta Imam Malik as asahul kutub. Then after Imam Bukhari's book was written, because he got more hadith and he's got more, so then they refer to this. But in terms of, as I said, it's not always like every single hadith. For example, the hadith which Imam Bukhari narrates via Imam Muhammad, because many hadiths Imam Bukhari narrates via his Ustad Abdullah ibn Yusuf from Imam Malik. So obviously the one that Imam Malik narrates directly has less change, so that's going to be asah. But as a whole, the Sahih Bukhari is asah. Following? Got it? Okay. Then he goes on to Hasan. We know what Hasan is. It's khaffu dhab. So فَإِنْ خَفَّ الضَّبْطُ فَالْحَسَنُ لِذَاتِهِ. If the dhabt of any of the narrators, is low, is khafif, what happens then? Then we will say this is now Hasan. وَبِكَثْرَةِ طُرُقِهِ. And this zamir here is referring back to Al-Hasan لِذَاتِهِ. So when we have a Hasan لِذَاتِهِ, the turuq, if the turuq of Hasan لِذَاتِهِ becomes and due to be, and by or due to, maf'ul lahu, due to, and due to the abundance of, what does turuq mean here? What does turuq mean? What does turuq mean here? Exactly, sanad. Turuq here means sanad. So due to the multitude or numerous chains of a Hasan lidhatihi, yusahha. It will be called what? Sahih liwa. لغيره. يصحح. It will be deemed to be sahih, but not sahih lidhati. It will be deemed to be what? Sahih li? What? It will be deemed to sahih لغيره. So if if any of the narrators are khafif al-dhabt, then the hadith will be Hasan lidhatihi. And due to the asanid of the Hasan lidhatihi being multiple, then it becomes sahih لغيره, because the khafif al-dhabt, the fear we had, or the precaution that we had regarding khafif al-dhabt narrator, this is now eliminated because of the multiple narrators. That multiple narrators are narrating this, so now it's going to be sahih. The khafif al-dhabt, small defect or the fear of a defect is been eliminated. Everyone following? Any questions? Okay. The next thing we have here is saying here, فَإِن جُمِعَ. What does jumi'a mean? If somebody says jumi'a, if Hasan and Sahih come together, فَإِن jumi'a. Basically what he's saying here is that Imam Tirmidhi, you will see, after a hadith, you may have seen it in Mishkat already, he says, hadithun hasanun sahihun. What does he say? Hasanun? Hadithun? What? Hasanun sahihun. You got it? What's the problem with this? When you say Hasanun sahihun, what's the problem with this? So the problem is that Hasan and Sahih are exclusive. According to our definition, Hasan and Sahih exclusive. Sahih means it has all the conditions and is tammuz up, and Hasan means khafif up. So you either Hasan or Sahih, you can't be both. So he's saying here, فَإِن جُمِعَ. So for example, Imam Tirmidhi, when he says here, a hadith is Hasan Sahih, what does that mean? So he's saying here, what does that mean? If he brings it together, فَإِن جُمِعَ, when you see Hasan and Sahih together, فَلِلتَّرَدُّدِ فِي النَّاقِدِ حَيْثُ التَّفَرُّدِ. So there is a jawab. Taraddud, raddada yuraddidu, to be uncertain. So he's saying here, Imam Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he's saying here that this is one opinion regarding this is a big issue here. Hadith and Hasan and Sahih. But he's got two answers. He got one answer. He's saying here that if you see Imam Tirmidhi saying Hasan and Sahih, is he being uncertain fi naqil? What's another name for naqil? The rawi. So due to uncertainty in the narration, haythu, where there is what? What's tafarrud mean? Tafarrud means what? What is tafarrud equal to? What's the word tafarrud equal to? Exactly, very good, very good. So he's saying here that if there's one chain, okay, this hadith is gharib. That means that Imam Tirmidhi was uncertain. He's saying Hasan Sahih. Basically, he's saying here is basically Hasanun aw Sahihun. That's basically what Imam Ibn Hajar rahimahullah is saying. That if you have one narrator, tafarrada bihi, only one narrator, is gharib. And he says Hasan Sahih, means Hasan aw Sahihun, I'm not sure. That's what Ibn Hajar is saying. Now when Imam Tirmidhi says this, is now Hasan aw Sahihun. Are you following? Make sense, everybody? وَإِلَّا. What does this mean here? Otherwise, meaning if it's not tafarrud, meaning there's aziz, there's two chains. فَبِإِعْتِبَارِ سَنَدَيْنِ or isnadain. Then he's trying to say basically, Hasanun fi sanadin and Sahihun fi sanadin. Let's summarize this. So Imam is saying here, Imam Tirmidhi says Hasan Sahih. What does he say? Hasanun Sahihun. There are two possibilities. Either this hadith it has sanadun wahid. And he says tafarrud basically. Tafarrud, which we say is equal to gharaba. Or what? There's sanadan fa akthar. There's two or more chains. Okay? So if he says, if this narration has two chains, then what does Hasan Sahihun mean? It means Hasanun fi sanadin is Hasan according to one chain and Sahih according to another chain. Make sense? And if he says Hasanun Sahihun and it's only got one chain, what does that mean? Hasanun aw Sahihun, basically. This is one opinion in Hajar rahimahullah. Other people have got different opinions, but this is what people have taken more or less. Is this clear to everybody? So let's look at an example of a Hasan. Okay? Imam Tirmidhi says here, حدثنا عقبة بن مكرم البصري, and he is thiqah. Then we have حدثنا سالم بن نوح. So people like Ibn Hajar in his book Lisan al-Mizan or Tahzib al-Tahdhib or Taqrib al-Tahdhib, he mentions him, he says here, Salim ibn Nuh, he's saduqun lahu awham. Saduq means what? That's lower than thiqah. not tamuz zabt. Lahu awham, he has waham sometimes. He makes these small errors sometimes. So what is he going to be? He's what? Thiqa means what? Tamuz zabt. When he says saduqun lahu awham, this means khafiful zabt. So if one person is khafiful zabt, this hadith automatically becomes what now? What does it become? Hasan. He's Ibn Jurayj, he's thiqa. Not only is he thiqa, he's faqihun fadil, meaning he's what? Like awthaq. He's a higher level of thiqa, like he's at the top tier of thiqa. Correct? And Amr ibn Shu'ayb and Abihi al-Jaddi, I explained to you before in Bayquniyah, that this is one of the most common chains common chains of Hasan. So Amr ibn Shu'ayb and Abihi al-Jaddihi, this is Abdullah ibn Amr al-As radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. So this say, because obviously there's ikhlaf regarding the sama' and the etc. So this becomes Hasan Sahih hadith, Hasan. So this hadith is Hasan li zati, Hasan li ghayrihi, or Sahih li ghayri, Sahih li zati. What is this hadith? What's it going to be? Imam Tirmidhi says hadithun Hasanun ghareebun. Hasanun ghareeb. So Hasan means what? Khafiful dhab, Salim ibn Nuh. And ghareeb means he's the only person who narrates this chain. Ghareeb. So this hadith is what? Hasan. Is it لذاته or لغيره? Hasan لذاته. In itself is Hasan because it has a khafiful dhab narrator. How would this hadith become Hasan Sahih لغيره? How would you make this hadith Sahih لغيره? How could you prove it Sahih لغيره? If there's another hadith with the same meaning, which reinforces the same meaning. So he says here, what you're saying, another hadith with the same meaning. So if you go over here, so this hadith has not exactly the same word, same meaning. Same meaning is fine as well. So for example, talking here, Sadaqatul Fitri wajibatun ala kulli muslimin, male or female, etc., etc. And if you go to here, this is Bukhari says, Zakatul Fitri sa'an min tamarin, ala al-abdi wal-hurri wal-zakari wal-unta wal-saghiri wal-kabir. So the whole, I'm not going to go to the fiqh of the hadith, not our discussion right now. But Imam Bukhari narrates, and we're going to assume that Bukhari is Sahih, because Bukhari is Sahih. So you have Yahya ibn Muhammad ibn Sakan, and then you have the Sanad, and this Sanad is obviously it's in Bukhari Sahih. So now this hadith itself is what? What's this hadith? This is going to be what? Sahih? Sahih li dhatihi. In itself is Sahih. Now, because of the second hadith, hadith number 2, we go back. This hadith is Hasan li dhatihi, but now what is it also? It is Sahih li ghayrihi. Or we can say, if you want to make it, Sahih li hadith al-Bukhari. It is Sahih because of the hadith in Bukhari, number 2 that we mentioned next page. So in itself, intrinsically, what is the quality? Intrinsically, it's Hasanun li dhatihi. But because of what? Because of the next hadith, it's Sahih li ghayrihi. And because of another hadith, makes it Sahih. Which is what? The one on the next page. Do you understand the idea of Hasan li dhat? So every Sahih li ghayrihi in itself is what? Every hadith that is Sahih li ghayrihi in itself is what? Hasan li dhati. It's Hasan li dhati in itself. However, what happens? What happens? Yes? What happens? It becomes Sahih li ghayrihi. It elevates its position. Understood? Yes, you following? Okay, let's stop here inshallah. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.